What was a house rule you had as a kid that you thought was completely normal until you grew up and realized not all households followed? My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected that I was hiding anything, they could and did go through anything to make sure. Dresser and desk drawers, bags, closet, car, whatever they felt was necessary. Even my mail was fair game. As a result, I got really good at hiding things. Strict parents raise good liars. We had family council every Sunday night after dinner. We would sit and say good things that happened that week. Share our grievances, if we had any. We always did. Make a dinner menu and assign chores. Frankly, it was stellar parenting. Though, if I mention it to my mother now, she will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. Edit. Thank you magical human who gave me gold. Haiku night dinners. Some nights we spoke in haiku, and only haiku. I had super laid back parents, but there were a few certain things that they were randomly crazy strict about. No gum, no Play-Doh, no cereal with sugar as one of the top 3 ingredients, no Simpsons. I had basically no rules growing up, but those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum and I'm 35. I come from a large family. Anytime we'd order pizza, we ordered a few different kinds because, obviously, there were different preferences. Any leftovers were left in their respective boxes and placed in the oven. I did that when I lived with a couple of roommates, and of course their reaction was, "I just burned this box. Why was this in the ducking oven?" I had to answer the phone. "Hello, this is first name last name speaking." Whenever I answered the phone, this is obviously in the 80s before caller ID on landlines. My mom tried to make my childhood friends do it too when they called me to play. As in, "Hi, can I talk to Jill Chulpan?" "Who is this?" "It's friend." "Well, friend, when you call this house and I answer the phone, you should say hello to me and then tell me that it's you. Your first name and last name. Before you ask to talk to Jill Chulpan." Boy, was I popular. If I got hurt doing a certain activity, I wasn't allowed to do that activity again. My mother ended that rule though when I broke my wrist snowboarding when I was 16 and didn't tell her until a month later when I couldn't move my wrist at all and it required surgery with a bone graft to repair. If you ever ran out of toilet paper whilst on the toilet, you had to sing the Stranded song or else no one else in the house would bring you a roll. I'm surprised I haven't seen anything about toilet paper, but my family kept toilet paper in the bathroom. It never made sense to me that people kept spare rolls outside and still doesn't make sense. Not mine, but my mother-in-law and her sister will fuss at you if you wash your hands in the kitchen sink. I think that's weird. If there's a sink and some hand soap, I say wash away. My wife isn't like that. This cracks me up. I had no idea that anyone else would do this. I wash my hands wherever, but my sister has been like that since we were kids. She would have to do the dishes, and then she would run to wash her hands in the bathroom, because somehow the bathroom water was different than the kitchen water. We are 40, and she still does this, and I still laugh at her for it. We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water, we were required to ask first. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents if I could eat or drink something if I was hungry or thirsty, and it was a hard habit to break when his mom told me I could literally eat or drink anything other than the alcohol. It was so weird to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my BF if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for getting an apple without asking first. It's just also weird, but it used to be so normal. My dad used to set up mine and my sister's Easter egg hunts in such a way we followed written clues from place to place as a way to help us learn to read. Until I was a young adult, I assumed that was how all kids did Easter egg hunts. Wacky time. No noise, annoying mum and dad until 7 AM. This was a really necessary one because I was a very early riser as a kid and I loved to talk to my parents. The rule was that I could come to their bed and curl up next to them, but I couldn't talk until 7. It was actually really nice and made sure I got enough rest myself. Tragically, once I started growing like 7 years later, mum and dad had to get up at 4 anyway to get me to the sheds. Sorry guys. Any of the kids 7 of us can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of the toy can't take it back until whoever's playing with it is done. If the toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be asked. I wasn't allowed to take a shower if I was home alone. I also learned at age 7 that other households close the bathroom door when using the toilet, and keeping it open was weird. I learned that by keeping the door open at a friend's house. A friend walked by the bathroom, saw me, told their mom. Their mom called my mom. And all of a sudden the new house rule was we close the bathroom door when using the toilet. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth. Before we got in bed, if they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs in our teeth and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them. But by the time we got to be 13 we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. I love thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I've even used that one while babysitting a fussy kid who doesn't want to brush their teeth get ready for bed, and it helps a lot. My mum used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10, 14 or so. The rule was that, as long as I didn't make a mess, and I'd put myself to bed by the time she got home, then I got 10 in the morning. If you couldn't find something, and you asked someone for help, sibling or parent, and they found it for you, they got to punch you in the arm. My mom freaks out about hearing commercials on TV. The second it goes to commercial break it has to be muted. She also mutes it if she thinks it's about to go to commercial, even though sometimes she's wrong and she doesn't really pay attention. So she doesn't notice a lot of the time when the commercials are over, so she leaves it on mute when the show is back on. It's very difficult to watch TV with her. I had to wash the dishes every night, even if I wasn't home for the meal. There were times I'd get home from an away basketball game I was on the team after 10 PM and the dishes had sat since they finished eating around 6:30 PM. My older brother's nightly chore: take out the garbage. He'd be done in 2 minutes. I'd have 30+ minutes of washing, drying, putting away, and cleaning up the kitchen. Maybe it's not a house rule, but when I was 6 my mom told me that if I behaved she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said see ya Monday and I knew. We weren't allowed to get into the fridge or the cabinets without asking permission. My family was very poor and we had a limited food budget, so eating something without permission very possibly meant eating one ingredient of a meal my stepmother was planning on cooking within the next few days. I went to friends' houses and they just ate whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Not a rule, but still to this day I'm befuddled at my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico. Horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would proceed to wake my brother and I up, simply to wait until the power came back on. For the life of me, I cannot figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. Edit. Everyone keeps suggesting, because of fire reasons, and come to think of it, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's actually how we lost that house. Maybe my mother is clairvoyant. If I told my parents I was leaving at a certain time, I had to leave at that time. Let's say I told my parents I would leave a party at 9. I couldn't leave at 8:50, or I'd get yelled at grounded. I couldn't leave at 9:10, or I would get yelled grounded. Same thing went for when I was leaving my house to go somewhere. My dad made a rule that I had to kill 7 flies a day during my summer break. How did you give him evidence? His dad could see the weight of his actions in his eyes. Imagine the scene. I come home through the door. A shame-filled tremble. Barely noticeable. Father looks up from his work, which is manual and manly. Our eyes lock. He knows. This is not a 7-fly stare. The seconds stretch out. Unspoken words weighing heavily on the atmosphere. A quiet buzzing. Barely noticeable at the edge of hearing. Without averting my eyes, my hand shoots out sideways. Slightly outwards. In a fluid, practiced motion of death. The fly dies in my closing paw. I do not flinch. Warmth fills those cold, glaring eyes. The spell is broken. Welcome home, son. No whistling. My family had a thing we called the food blanket. When we'd eat casual meals, we'd lay a blanket on the living room floor and eat on it, like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of set the table, my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being really confused when I learned every family didn't have a food blanket. When I got in trouble, I was put on reading restriction as a punishment. I loved to read as a kid, still do, so it was an effective punishment at the time. My parents used a laissez-faire parenting style. No censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. Pretty awkward when I brought the VHS with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The parents were mortified. We weren't allowed to walk in our dining room unless we were using the room for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. Wasn't in my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we'd touch the walls with our dirty hands. So they made us piss in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and just poured it down the drain when we were done. Never thought it was strange until I brought it up to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. I couldn't add the jokes in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer song. My dad thought it was disrespectful. It's not really a house rule, it's just a really odd one. Also, when a parent says your name, you have to reply coming, not yeah, because they'll ignore it. First thing upon coming in the house, you have to change into clean pants and wash your hands. Guests were exempt from the pants rule, but not hand washing. If you took your shoes off while you were out, you had to change your socks as well. When I was sick, I couldn't be in my bed because it would make it dirty. My mom put a towel in a corner on the hardwood floor, and I had to stay there until she deemed me better enough to use my bed. WTF. My father never let us talk around the dinner table. Once when I was 15, I asked everyone around the table how they were doing and how their day was. My dad got up angrily after hurriedly finishing his meal and said, "I can't stand people talking around a meal. If I wanted to talk to you, I would." We finished our meal in silence. I wasn't allowed in my parents' room at all, not even to use their shower if the whole bath was occupied and we were going to be late. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,